morning, survivors of narcissistic and abusive personalities. Today I want to talk about things that make us abandon or soften our boundaries. And I've come up with 4 things that I could think of that I see most commonly that cause people to retreat, soften, or abandon the boundaries that they're trying to set. One reason is that there are particular people who tend to wear us down. They're better at what they do than we are at setting boundaries. So they're better at crossing boundaries than we are at setting boundaries. A lot of times this comes across as negotiation. It can come across as flirting, even if it is a romantic relationship. It can come off as playful, or it can come off as just somebody who almost just doesn't like to be told what to do. You're saying, I need some space, and I'd ask that you stop texting and calling. I will reach out to you when I'm ready to speak with you. And they just keep texting and keep calling. And then when they text, they're saying things like, I know you don't want to talk to me right now, but I know you said you needed space, but or just letting you know I'm thinking about you. I know you're not speaking to me right now. They're actively crossing a boundary as they're saying that they know that there's a boundary. So observing that about someone, looking at their behaviors and not at their words. The texting is a behavior. Calling is a behavior. So if they are, another one is, I don't want you at the house. I don't want you at my house. If it's someone you share children with, we'll meet in a public place and then I'll give you the kids. They're going to come up with a reason why they need to come by the house. Oh, I know I said I was going to drop the kids off to you at the mall, but I'm already in your neighborhood because we went to that movie theater. And so to save me the drive, I'm just sitting here on your street and ready for when you get home. And then next thing you know, they're knocking on your door. Can I use your bathroom? Whatever. Oh, the kids want me to come in so I can see the new toys that you bought them. Or so they sort of just weasel their way past the boundary, or they do it in a way, like I said before, that it seems like that they're just sort of, I acknowledge there's a boundary here, but I'm going to negotiate with you a little bit. This is something to just be aware of, by the way. It's really hard to set boundaries, especially at first when we're getting used to it. So, don't beat yourself up about times when you have softened your boundaries or abandoned them. We all do it. It takes practice. And we have to teach people how to treat us, which also takes practice on their part. So they're not going to get it right at first sometimes. And sometimes that's purposeful, and other times it's just that they're not used to it. So another thing that makes us soften our boundaries or abandon our boundaries is guilt. Whew, that's a big one, isn't it, guys? Guilt. We are so riddled with guilt. We are just like got guilt coursing through our veins. We feel guilty about stuff that isn't even, we've done nothing wrong. We feel guilt about things that someone else did. I mean, the way we take on guilt is actually quite comical. But it's sad too, because it causes us to hold back when it comes to, being fierce with how you want to live your life and the type of lifestyle you want and the types of behaviors that you want in your life and the ones that you don't. Guilt was used. Remember the toolbox video, right? So we had that old toolbox that we were given when we were growing up or having experiences with abusive, neglectful, or enmeshed family systems. Guilt is used by abusive, toxic, and manipulative people to control us, to get in our head, to make us comply, to make us doubt ourselves. And so guilt is a red flag. How about that one, right? So we talk about this in our SNAP program in the 4th class, where we're talking about recovery from abuse. And in that section, we talk about guilt being a red flag. So whenever you're feeling guilt, stop for a second and think, someone is trying to make me feel this way. A lot of times that's what's going on. But if it isn't that someone's making you feel guilty or trying to guilt you over a boundary you're trying to set, it's that you could be looking through through lenses that aren't healthy or old ways that you used to look at yourself. So whenever you're feeling guilty, take a second and examine that. Don't let guilt dictate your decisions towards healthiness and towards your well-being. We feel guilt when we do self-care. We feel guilt when we don't do self-care. We just feel guilty. So when you're feeling guilt, especially when it comes to boundaries, just expect that that's how it feels. It's going to feel icky and awkward, but it's a red flag. It means old thinking or someone's actively trying to guilt you, because empathic survivors of abuse, rarely is there anything that you really need to be sitting there feeling guilty about. You know, you're working to avoid that feeling at all times. Which brings me to my next one. The third thing that can cause us to soften or abandon our boundaries is avoiding regret. I see this all the time, especially when it has to do with setting boundaries with family members, especially elderly family members, right? We've got the holidays coming up, guys, and I'm going to be doing a video about that in a couple of weeks, and about how we navigate the holidays when we're trying to maintain boundaries, when we have gone no contact possibly, or we're using gray rock with someone. How do you navigate the holidays? Well, one of the reasons why we will soften our boundaries around a special event or a family member is because we think that if we don't comply or we don't do the acceptable behavior or act. So let's say, for example, and this happens quite frequently, let's say you have an elderly parent who is neglectful and abusive, and at this point in your life, you've set boundaries with that person, and perhaps you're no contact, and now they're in the hospital. You don't want to go to the hospital. You don't want to see the person. You know, nothing's going to come of it. But you're so worried that if you don't go, you're going to live with this horrible feeling of regret. So we make decisions trying to avoid a future feeling that doesn't even exist yet in reality, right? We're just afraid that we will feel that way. We could feel that way maybe someday in the future. So again, nothing to beat yourself up about. It's just think about your reasoning. Why am I doing this? Why did I decide that I would go ahead and show up to be verbally and emotionally abused at the hospital by my other family members and by the person I'm visiting? I'm doing this because I might regret it one day if I don't. No, guys, no, that's not a good reason to abandon and soften your boundaries, because that feeling of regret hasn't even happened yet, and you most likely will not feel regret. In fact, you're going to feel empowered, and you're going to feel better as the result of not having that toxicity in your life. So avoiding regret is something that we want to keep an eye on, all right, that idea that comes into our mind. Another one is you're tired. I'm tired, and people who cross our boundaries just drain us. And so sometimes it's just like, I'm not going to win this battle. Maybe I'll win the war. I just can't fight anymore on this. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And that's one of the reasons why self-care and nurturing yourself and taking care of yourself is so important, because when our reserves are spent, when our resources, our time, our attention, and our energy and our emotion, when we are depleted in those areas, it weakens our resolve. We become more susceptible to manipulation and to softening our boundaries when we're tired and when we're not taking care of ourselves. So not to harp on self-care like I do all the time, but self-care is so important because it helps us, keep our strength, keep our perspective, keep our feet, firmly rooted in our boundaries and our decision to do so. Anyhow, so the things that make you soften your boundaries: avoiding regret, the feelings of guilt, feeling exhausted, and then particular people that are really good at crossing boundaries. Those are the 4 things that generally will cause us to soften boundaries. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks. Bye.